Dial M for Murder remake from the woman's perspective, whatever that means. Michael Bay's pandemic horror thriller Songbird is coming to premium video on demand, but do we need a pandemic horror thriller? Is there room in the podcast world for a Kesha horror podcast? David Fincher calls Joker a betrayal of the mentally ill. I'm discussing all of this in my Twisted Horror News Hour. Let's get creepy and informed together. Hey, Twisted people, it's your Twisted Girl Next Door here, Chauncey K. Robinson, and thank you for joining me on my new video series. Don't worry, I'm still doing my horror movie reviews. Can't stop, won't stop, love my horror movie reviews. But this one is basically me talking about the horror news that's happening in the entertainment world and outside of the entertainment world, because we all know horror is both a reflection of the real world in the artistic sense, but still happens in the real world in a non-artistic sense. And basically, I want to highlight major things happening in the horror world that maybe you want to talk about and I want to talk about that I don't get to talk about necessarily within a specific horror movie review. Okay, so according to Deadline, MGM Television is developing a limited series based on the 1952 play by Frederick Knott, which has been adapted into the 1954 awesome Alfred Hitchcock movie, Dial M for Murder. Now, the original, or the first movie adaptation, I should say, that came out in 1954 was starring the iconic Grace Kelly. And it's one of my favorite movies. I really do enjoy it. It has that kind of 1950s, horror noir thing going on with somewhat dramatic acting, but stylized as well. And there was also, fun fact, a 1998 adaptation of the play starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Michael Douglas that was called The Perfect Murder. Now, for this limited series, the actress Alicia Vikander is executive producing through her Vicarious film banner with an eye to potentially star in the series. Now, here's the kicker. This series is supposedly going to be different because it comes from the woman's perspective. Okay, so I'm totally for a remake. I mean, I think Dial M for Murder is a fun story. It has this idea of a husband who wants to catch his wife cheating or catches his wife cheating and then basically decides that he wants to kind of catch her in the act and assassinate her, and things go wrong. So he then turns to trying to frame her for murder and having her being, sent up the river to jail. Some way he's trying to make her pay for the affair that she's having. So that's kind of the whole thing for the story. It's like Dial M for Murder here, and whatnot. And I think it's going to be very hard to somehow try to make that from the woman's perspective if we're still having it so that the main woman character is the woman being set up for murder. The reason why I say that is because, well, she's the one being set up for murder. The whole thing of the movie, anyway, with the Alfred Hitchcock version, was watching the husband's plan kind of unravel, right? That was the intensity. Is he going to get caught? Is it going to be exposed? Is she going to be saved in the end? And if you make it so it's from this character's perspective, gender aside, if it's from the character perspective, that's the one that's being set up for murder, you kind of have to wonder, how are they going to be able to tell the story in the same intense way? That's what I'm wondering. And not saying it can't be done, but I'm saying I would rather have it. So if you're going to do it from, I don't know, maybe a more perspective where the woman is more in control, and she doesn't have to be the good character necessarily. Maybe you can switch it so that instead of the husband trying to set up the wife for murder, it's the wife trying to set up the husband for murder. And you can even switch the ending around. I don't know, kind of an adaptation that kind of a loose adaptation. And I do wonder if this is one of those gimmicks to say, hey, this is different. You should watch this, because why else would you watch this adaptation when you could totally watch the superior Alfred Hitchcock version? Oh, no, because it's from the woman's perspective. Now, you know me. Okay, if you've watched any of my stuff, you know I'm on my soapbox for gender equality, for women's rights, for the feminist agenda. I just don't like when entertainment has a tendency to try to do it for views and clicks. And I think that's in bad faith. You know, it's the same way when they try to lure you in with, hey, there's diversity here. Hey, there's people of color. And then the people of color hardly have character development, or they're not really around, and you were lured in on the idea that it was going to be different that way. I feel like this may fall into that same plot device where it's like, hey, it's from the woman's perspective, which really just maybe means more close-ups of the actress who's playing her and maybe a few extra scenes here and there. And then it kind of plays out the same ending and so on and so forth. And you kind of wonder, well, was this not an empowering role for Grace Kelly at the time? I mean, I think that's also the inverted thing you're kind of coming out with when you do it that way, as though, you know, Grace Kelly wasn't the embodiment of a really cool female character. She had her quirks and her, mistakes that she made in transgressions, but a strong female character doesn't have to be a perfect female character. So I do wonder what they mean from the woman's perspective and how that's actually going to be done within this kind of plot, unless they're twisting around the story in some way. And honestly, you don't need to twist around the story in some way. Okay, so moving on, Michael Bay's pandemic horror thriller Songbird is coming to premium video on demand. Oh my gosh. Okay, so like so many other films this year, and most likely going into next year, this upcoming movie will not be coming to a theater near you or me for the foreseeable future, except for our TVs. And what that means is that the video will become available for $19.99 for a 48-hour rental on all play-to-play platforms. So following Songbird, it's going to be on play-for-play platforms, and then it's going to go over to major streaming services in 2021, a major streaming service. And my guess is that's going to either be Amazon Prime or Netflix. Although Netflix has been doing its own thing with its original programming, so they may not be in the, area to be wanting to put out that kind of money for something. Although they did try to buy the Bond film, although, they ended up trying to charge Netflix way too much, so they backed out. But they may be open to taking Songbird. So that's why I'm thinking it may go to Netflix. But okay, so this movie basically follows a bicycle messenger in a post-apocalyptic near future where COVID-19 has mutated to COVID-23. Okay, so the bicycle messenger hasn't seen his girlfriend, Sarah, since the pandemic began. And also the government is snatching up people who are infected with COVID-19 and putting them into camps. Okay, so that's the plot. I don't know why that's the plot. When I first saw the trailer for this movie, I thought to myself, this is too soon. Why are we doing this? Don't we have enough of that right now in our real lives? Who is actually going to sit down and watch something we're already experiencing get worse? I don't know. So I kind of wonder how many people are going to be willing to pay $20 for that. I don't know. Are you going to be willing to pay $20 for that? I'm not going to be willing to pay $20 for that. I honestly think it's unnecessary. And even if it comes to a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime, like included in the Prime membership, I think I probably would still avoid watching it. I don't want to think about a future where the government's taking sick people and putting them into a camp. That doesn't even make sense, to be honest. If the thing has mutated, then I'm guessing the people are going to probably die and stuff. So what's the point of putting them in a camp? I'm not really understanding that, unless it makes them mutants or something. I don't know. So I'm not feeling the idea of this movie at all. But if you are interested, it will be coming to PVOD. So you can pay for that, I guess. There is a Kesha horror podcast coming. Yes. And an exclusive with Entertainment Weekly, singer-songwriter and fellow March 1st baby, let's give it up for the Pisces, woohoo, Kesha has revealed that she is jumping into the podcast world with her new podcast, Kesha and the Creepies. That's happening. Okay, so via EW, Entertainment Weekly, the Grammy-nominated singer-songwriter will dive into matters of the occult, urban legends, psychedelic art, astrology, and more upon the launch of her Kesha and the Creepies podcast, launching November 20th on the iHeartRadio app. And Kesha is quoted as saying, "The creepy and unexplainable is what makes life magic." Yes, she's right. So let's talk about it. So I love Kesha's music, and I am all about people branching out. I think she's a very strong entertainer. I think she's a great singer-songwriter, and I think she's been through so much and has such resilience. So I'm all about people branching out. I mean, heck, I'm like an advocacy, well, I'm not like, I am an advocacy journalist, and I love talking horror and things like that. So I'm all about mixing it up. Now, what I worry about with this is that the corporate media will act like podcasts like hers, celebrity run podcasts, are the only ones that exist. And if you're someone who loves the genre, the area of horror and true crime and all that, you know that these celebrity run podcasts are not the only ones that exist. In fact, as it goes, it's usually non-celebrity people that start things like this, like podcasts, YouTube shows, and things like that. And then, as they become more and more trendy, what you have is celebrities who already have money and things and notoriety in the other chosen field that they've chosen to do, going into that sector and doing it. Now, I don't have an issue with that per se, because I think everyone should be able, you have, YouTube people and podcast people end up going and do acting and things like that. People switch around constantly. So that's not what it is. I think my main issue with this is that there are so many awesome horror podcasts and horror shows, more so podcasts in this particular venture that I'm talking about. And a lot of them don't get enough love already. So I do kind of worry that this could go one of two ways. The one way I worry, the one other way I'm actually excited about if it goes this way. The one worry that I have is that if this becomes a big thing, people are going to act like Kesha invented the wheel of horror podcasts. And then you might have other celebrities, and then suddenly, people who have been doing it for so long, the stans show up. You know what stans are, people who are fans of certain celebrities, they show up. And, there can be a notion to kind of act like anybody else who isn't famous already is copying the celebrity who did it like 4 to 5 years after other people have already started it. And I think that could just make a very hostile environment that it doesn't need to be. So that's the one worry I have. The other hopeful thing is that maybe with her getting into it, with Kesha getting into it, they'll have people who listen to it, and then kind of like a gateway, drug, but not actually a drug, but a gateway drug, they will find themselves exploring other programs and finding other horror programs from not so famous already celebrities who happen to get into it. So there's a plus and a minus. I do think podcasting is a huge field, like anything else, YouTube as well. Everything is crowded. So it's not to say, hey, she already has a celebrity behind her. Why not do this? So I'm not against it. I just wonder, will it add much, or will she be leaning more on the idea that she's Kesha and she's a celebrity and, she has access and connections to famous people that she can already have on. So she kind of already has a jump start that maybe other podcasters who built theirs from the ground up don't have. But no shade to her. I love Kesha. I love her music. Loved her latest album. Got all her albums. But I do kind of wonder about that. And anytime, but it's not so much from them. It's more so corporate media having a tendency to ignore everybody else who's doing it and acting like celebrities do it for the first time ever. So that's my one issue, but not a lot. And then finally, we have David Fincher calls Joker a betrayal of the mentally ill. So director David Fincher recently did an interview with Telegraph where he talked about how basically movies like Joker that are dark and gritty wouldn't have been allowed to be released by a major studio years ago and make millions of dollars. So first and foremost, the headlines around this whole situation with the quote from David Fincher kind of makes it seem like he's throwing shade at Joker, when in reality, he's not throwing shade at Joker. But we all know, people got to get their clicks. So everyone kind of ran with like half of a quote. It wasn't even the full quote. It was more so him explaining that Joker, the character of Joker that Joaquin Phoenix played recently, which was a great film. I reviewed it. I didn't think it was going to be as great as it ended up being and political as it ended up being, but it was. You should check out my review. But one of the things is that it is kind of other characters we've seen before, like the character from Taxi Driver that was played by Robert De Niro and others. And so it kind of creates this character and places him in the comic book world, and he is mentally ill. And there is kind of a betrayal of society to his character and the characters like him. I feel like that's what he meant by the betrayal, not so much that the movie itself was a betrayal of the mentally ill. And I really don't know where they got that from. I don't know if everyone just kind of not everyone. I don't know if certain outlets just kind of misinterpreted it, or it was just like, this will sell better than him kind of, taking it to major studios, because that's ultimately what he's talking about. He really is going after the idea that major studios are risk adverse these days, because this interview stemmed from him basically making a deal recently with another major platform, Netflix. He has a new deal with Netflix, and basically him saying that the kind of storytelling he wants to do wouldn't be possible with major studios. As we know, he made Fight Club and some other films, I think Gone Girl and others. So he's basically saying, I'm able to do this in Netflix. You have Joker that, although it was able to come out, it's far and few in between, and you could do it more on streaming platforms. And honestly, I think he's right. Okay, Twisted people. So that is some of my horror highlights for today on the Twisted News Hour. Thanks for joining me. I love talking about this stuff in a little bit more of an expanded way, the things that are happening in the genre that we love. Let me know what you think of the news item. Do you think we need some more horror podcasts led by celebrities? Are you feeling the new idea of a remake for Dial M for Murder, or do you think it's just kind of a gimmicky way that they're trying to have a different selling point for it? Let me know, comment down below, and also be sure to subscribe so that you're the first to know when I post my videos. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy and informed together.